we have two kinds of governments in the world. We got the outer governments of the people that we know, like Clinton and Bush and these kind of guys, and Gorbachev, who are out there on the TVs and appear to be running everything, but which are not. And underneath this, there is a group of people who are, in essence, really the richest people in the world, who have been together a long time ago, and it really goes all the way back to Atlantis, that have a great deal of Martian blood in them, that can really control the world and all that goes on in the world. They control the wars, and when the wars start and when the wars end. They control the phantoms and famines, and when they start and when they end, and they control. You'd be amazed at what they can actually do and what they can't do, and what they have done and what they in the past. And at this point in the game, at least up until a few years ago, they really weren't too concerned about us. We were just being used on a lot of levels. When the secret government found out about this in 1968, and probably had a pretty good indication even as far back as 1964, they decided to make some changes. Number one, it was determined from the report and everything else that more than likely there wouldn't be a building left standing on the planet from this thing, that whole continents would go up and down, that there would be massive changes under all of this. And so the secret government decided that they were going to, that they couldn't stay on Earth, that they were going to get off the Earth and leave, because the Earth was going to be devastated so much. And so they joined the United States and Russia together as one country a long time ago. They blended a lot of our money and information and all kinds of things and put them all together. And the race to the moon between the United States and Russia was coordinated by them. It was a race, all right, but it was in fact a real race. They needed the moon very bad to do what they had to do. And so think about it for a moment. Once they gained the moon, there were 6 trips from the United States in the late 60s. I think the last one was 72 or 71 or something like that. I really need to get those dates clear in my mind. But there were 6 of them all together from the United States. And then after the last one, once we got there and we established everything like that, total silence. We don't even talk about the moon anymore. Nobody goes there. Nothing. There's no moon. Doesn't exist. You know. Why? Why haven't we gone there again? You think that we've learned everything about the moon there is to learn? There's another reason why, is because they needed the moon as a instead of building a, you know, if you want to go deep into space, if you want to leave the Earth and go somewhere else, with the technology that we have, you need to build a space station or a satellite out there to bring the materials up and everything else like that, to assemble the kinds of things you need to go further if you're going to bring lots of people and materials. But why do that when you already have a satellite up there called the moon? And so they needed to get to the moon to do what they had to do. So the entire world's energies and direction were aimed by the secret government toward just getting to the moon. And then once they got there, then they didn't want you to know anymore. We made 6 trips, but Russia made 2,000 trips. 2,000 trips, a little different. And what they did was they went around the backside of the moon, so we can't see them because the backside stays hidden to us all the time. And they built 3 major installations back there, one of which was a great catastrophe because it collapsed and killed a lot of people. And to assemble all the things that were needed for them leaving the Earth. And then from there, once they got everything in place, everything that they needed to know, and they didn't want, see, while they were doing this, they didn't want your attention on the moon. So that's why they got your attention away from going other places. So they did, however, make a very important trip to Mars, which we saw the face on Mars, and mapped every square inch of Mars. They mapped the whole thing except for the 2 poles. They mapped it all out. They wanted a whole thing of it. That was real important too. And then once they got all this together, they went to Mars. That's where they decided to go to, which is only appropriate since they were Martians to go back to where they came from. And that's the planet that they chose. There could have been other places, I guess. Venus wouldn't be very good when you got a 900 degrees surface. But Mars is very, could easily keep life, human life there. There's water there. There's lots of water under the surfaces. It's everything that they need in certain ways. And so they went to Mars, and they built complexes there, primarily underground, but not totally. And they built this whole thing, and it took many years. And by about I'm really guessing, I don't know the exact time, but somewhere in the 1980s, let's say 1985, that's sort of in the middle, somewhere around in there, they completed the structures and everything they needed. They built a structure that would keep approximately 10,000 people alive indefinitely on Mars, to make a total transformation over to there for as long as is necessary. And of course, who they were bringing was just themselves, their families, and their friends. And once they had the whole thing set up, they just sat back and just basically didn't really care what happened to us, because they figured we didn't stand a chance from their point of view. These are the same people that had, in the early part of this century, very early, probably about 1910 is my guess, made connection with the Greys. And though the Greys had been here earlier than that, the secret government had begun to make contracts with them to allow them to do certain things. I'm going to take back off on that, what the secret government did with the Greys in just a little while, so you can understand all of that. But it's another story. I'll continue on with this one on Mars for a little bit. It's another part of all of this, which is actually still connected to Mars too. And so they built all this stuff. They came back here and said, "Well, hope you guys make it." And there's no way they can get everybody off the surface, even if they wanted to anyway. So there's nothing they figured they could do. But they didn't really care anyway. And then about a few years ago, and I don't remember the dates and times in this either. It's not real important, but I guess time has really been kind of going by here now. I guess it's been, it was in the late 80s. It was not too long after they completed everything and got it all finished. It was I don't know what it was. I don't remember. It was 87, 88, 89, somewhere around in there. They became aware of something that I'm sure shocked them to their bones. And that was that it isn't just the Earth that is going through a new North and South Pole, but it's all the planets, including Mars, all of them. And so all that work was just for nothing, just a waste of time. Even though they have technology beyond your imagination, they are technically incredible what they can do and what they can't do, and what they're capable of doing. They still don't have the ability, no more than the Greys do, to leave this place and go to the next octave, which appears to be, by everyone's knowledge, going to be a necessity. Just as if we were You know, it's just like if we were in an airplane, it's about ready to run out of gas, we could all see that we're going to have to land real soon. Well, we're in a situation where we're about to run out of gas, only that's not a real good explanation, and we're going to have to do something. We're going to have to make a change. But the way God has done it is we're going to have to do this all together. The concepts of polarity and good and evil and such, and the ideas that you can just forget about part and move toward another one won't work in the dynamics of the situation that we're in. And they've become aware of this. And so because of that, they have tried to rethink things, and they have tried to allow certain changes to occur in the world that normally would never be allowed. For example, it began when the allowance of the Berlin Wall to fall down, and all the changes that's been going on in Russia, and all the incredible rapid changes that have been going on politically. I mean, you don't realize how fast things are going. Maybe you do, but usually these kinds of changes don't happen overnight. But they've been happening overnight only because the secret government has allowed them to happen. They've allowed these changes, which have been wanting to be changed anyway by the people, and so they've allowed the situation to continue. And if they could ever figure out a way how to leave us behind and make it through, they probably would, still at this point. Though at this point, they're right back to where they were when they first got to Atlantis and joined with us, and that is, they're going to have to learn this feminine side, which they never didn't want to do, and then they decided during Atlantis that they were never going to do that again. None of this allowing stuff to happen, you know, they were going to control everything. And they're coming up to the same conclusion the Grace came up with. It requires both sides. It requires male and female to be able to make this translation. And intellect alone, the male side alone, can't do it alone. And so even though they don't like it, it's the way it is. And so for a long time, when you go back and you look at the stuff that happened in when people were finding out about a lot of these things, I can't remember what the films were that came out. MJ12 and all that stuff that came out, and the films that came out for a while, because what they were doing for a long time is purposely going around and looking for guys like me and people that were becoming aware of the situation and killing them, getting rid of every one of them they could, so that they could continue doing what they're doing. Now it's a total reversal. A few years ago, we sent a satellite to Mars, which was probably the one that brought back the photographs that Face of Mars came on. And when it went by one of the moons, there's 2 moons going around Mars. When it went by one of the moons and it recorded photographs of this moon is so weird, it just defies all kinds of they don't even know how it could do what it's doing. It's just skimming over the surface of Mars. Just skimming over the mountaintops, you might say, almost. Real fast. It's so low to the surface that if you were sitting at the North Pole of Mars, you couldn't see the moon. The moon would be down below the horizon going around the planet. So it's just barely off the surface, going really, really fast. They don't know, they've calculated how, what it, according to its weight and everything else like that, it's impossible. The only calculations they could come up with is that it's hollow. This is the only thing that they could figure out. And so it's a weird moon. But then they saw some other weird things on it when it went by, and they found these cuts or lines. There's like slashes. This is the moon. Found these. these things all over it. And they are in a V shape from the side. And I think they're about, I forget what they said, about 120 feet wide and 75 feet deep, something like that, and they run for long distance, real straight. And they're covered with some kind of, inside the V is some kind of silvery, shiny substance. And so they don't know what they are. They've never seen anything like it. It falls into a new category of phenomena, and you know, they recorded. They sent another one by recently. I guess this is in probably the early, I'm guessing here again, but earlier part of 1980. Maybe a little later, I'm not sure. And they took photographs of the moon again. The only thing is that when they looked at one photograph of the old one that went by and the new one that went by, there were more of these lines that weren't there before, which is kind of impossible by everything we know, because there's no wind and there's no water and there's no air and there's no way for erosion to take place or anything else like that, and there's no way for them to be formed that we can conceive of. And so that sparked the interest of some people. And so Russia and the United States and England and France, and I think there might have been some other countries involved in there, sent 2 satellites up there to check this out. This was back, this is much newer now. This is, does anybody know when this was? It was 1990 maybe, or something like that? 89 or 90, somewhere around in there. I'm not sure exactly when this was. I need to check my dates. And one of the satellites just disappeared. Don't know where it is. Just, it's gone. Who knows? And the second one, though, reached the planet. And when it got to the Mars planet, it only had one video camera, and its video camera was locked into the surface of Mars. And when it came into the surface of Mars, it moved in between Mars and this low-flying moon. I really don't know how many miles it is between here, but it can't be a whole lot, considering you can't see it from the North or South Pole. So anyway, it moved in between the middle of it, and its next purpose was to rotate 180 degrees, lock on the surface of the moon, move up to within 100 yards of the moon, and start photographing these things, 6 square inches at a time. Now, considering that they can pick up the date of a dime from a satellite around the planet, that to be 100 yards away from something is like being there. So, I mean, they can get really good photographs blown up full size and just like stepping on there. And that was their intention, to look carefully at what this was, and probably look in more ways than just light. There's other ways to look, other aspects of the electromagnetic spectrum and things to look at. And however, it never got a chance, because as it was looking down at the surface, let me get something here. This is written, Zecharia Sitchin wrote about this, but he's not the only one, and there's other people. I'd like to get these on a slide, actually, or a drawing. 2 things happened very quickly. The first thing is that suddenly something appeared on the surface of the Earth. And what it was this. I don't know if you could see this or not, but it looks like a building. It's an installation on the surface of Mars. This camera's looking at the surface of Mars. You can see looks like a building and complex with a road coming in and this whole thing sitting directly below it. This is on page 281. And the very next thing that happened was, you see this elliptical shadow? A 16-mile-long elliptical shadow appears on the surface of Mars. Something between the sun and Mars, but wasn't in the camera, this big thing appears, comes into place, a shadow, and then something comes from whatever the thing that was causing the shadow, probably, and now we know for sure because of what just happened recently, and knocked out the satellite. And it was all on the last 6 frames. And this was all shown in Europe. And they re-showed it just recently, I've understood. And they've even showed the last 6 frames now, but for a long time they wouldn't let the last 6 frames out. The military wouldn't allow them out. All the military would say is there's something here that's not supposed to be there. But they've now shown what I'm being told is they now have released that, and it shows this 21-mile-long cigar-shaped thing, I think it is, in the sky, with something that comes over and knocks out the satellite.